Welcome back, Tribe. We're here today with special guest Chris Lacava, and we're going to be discussing Hapkido and Chris's journey in the art of Hapkido. We also have our guest co-host on Hanjido to offer a little bit of perspective on Daito Ryu, Aikido-Jujitsu, and the relationship between Hapkido and Daito Ryu. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Doing well, thanks.
Great. Chris, so for the audience at home, give us the benefit of a brief introduction. Tell us about yourself a little bit and about your martial arts background.
I've been in the martial arts for a little over 30 years now and enjoyed it ever since I started. It's been kind of like an addiction for me. Actually, one of the better addictions that you could have. I started out in Kempo, and then moved on, did a little Taekwondo, did a little this, did a little that. Eventually went to Hapkido, and I've been training Hapkido since the 90s. And my teacher lives in Korea, Grandmaster Lim Young-soo, so I go visit him. Try to visit him once a year, but unfortunately finances sometimes don't dictate that. So I go visit him and train with him as well. And that's an overview of my martial arts. I also do a lot of Filipino arts, and I'm kind of at a loss as far as specifics or what more you'd like. So feel free to ask questions, and I will be glad to answer them.
Perfect. Well, Chris, the system. Well, let me ask you this first.
Yeah.
The Hapkido, that you've kind of made that your home after trying different martial arts. What about Hapkido attracted you to the art? What did you like, and what made you stay there with it for so long?
I originally liked the self-defense aspects of it. I enjoyed being able to control an attacker rather than just having to beat the snot out of them. That appealed to me.
Now, the system of Hapkido that you teach is pretty unique, and from what I understand, speaking with different instructors in the field, it's one of the, I want to say the more real, but one of the more traditional or more close to the home or the original art. You know, tell me a little bit about that, about the evolution of Hapkido. You know, especially your Kwan, what the school is about, some of the history there.
Okay. Well, Hapkido in and of itself is a relatively modern martial art. It started right after World War II, after Dojin Young-soo came over from Japan. Back in the day, in the Japanese occupation of Korea, it was common for children to be sent over to Japan to work. Well, long story short, Che originally, Grandmaster Che, Dojin Che, the story goes that he came upon and trained or was a house servant of Sukaku Takeda, who was master of Daito Ryu Aikido-Jujitsu. So there's a lot of mystery about that. Was he treated like an adopted son and trained with them, or was he a houseboy there? You don't know. But the skills that he learned, however he learned them there, came back to Korea after the death of Sukaku Takeda, and he started teaching. And that's how Hapkido really started. My school, the Jungki Kwan, that's the style that I train in, Jungki Hapkido, was started by Grandmaster Lim Young-soo. And Grandmaster Lim, he was a student of Che Young-soo's, and he's probably the longest running student of Che Young-soo. So what happened was Grandmaster Lim is one of only 4 people in the world to ever get their 9th dons directly from the founder of Hapkido, Dojin Che. And he spent a lot of time with them, both on and off the mat, which is very cool. Sometimes you only get like one or the other, but with him you get both kinds of stories. Dojin Che, he closed his dojo. He closed his school in, I believe, 1976. And from 76 until his death in 86, he taught out of my teacher school, the Jungki Kwan, in Daegu, South Korea. So we have a lot of the traditional stuff, because a lot of people trained with Doji and Che, but they only spent a little time with them. And so they kind of were in and out, where Grandmaster Lim stayed there and was really with him and spent a lot of time with him. So we get to see some of that more traditional stuff that a lot of people don't see, which is really cool. And I dig that.
Now, Hanjiro, let me ask you, Chris touched upon this about the relationship between the two founders, the two instructors of Daito Ryu and of Hapkido. And I was speaking with Han off air a little bit, and there is actually some pretty legitimate documentation of the relationship there. Han, can you share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah, just to give some background, Takeda Sokaku, he was a broad spectrum teacher. He taught everybody, not really caring if the person was, the head of a military family or a dock worker. He basically was very good at seeing a person's character, and there's a lot of stories to back that up, where he knew if a person was essentially good or evil just by looking at them, and he taught a good amount of people. But the crazy thing is he documented almost every one of them where there was money transaction. Now we know that the founder of Hapkido had some training in Daito Ryu. Now we don't even know if he trained directly with Sokaku or if he trained with one of his direct students at his deshi that lived with him. But the last student, direct student of Sokaku, Yamamoto was his last name. He passed away a little while ago. I studied with one of his direct students, and we've talked about this. He did say that the founder of Hapkido had training probably within either Sokaku or another direct student, and that there is paid documentation for that. But Sokaku's family was very interesting. His father was a very hard individual. The added story that he was somehow possibly an adopted son or something is likely, not from any social or cultural standpoint. It's just Sokaku himself, his son, was the one who changed Daito Ryu and really codified it and made it into a modern martial art. Before that, Sokaku had so many techniques and so many variations, it was hard to keep track of, but he kept track of the bills very meticulously. And there is direct mention of the founder of Hapkido being taught, and there being some, I don't know if it was monetary or something was exchanged in that, because he is written down in a lot of these documentation books. And Sokaku walked around with them like a Bible. He always had them on him. So there is that documentation. I'm curious to see, as you explained, that this being one of the last direct lines from the founder of Hapkido, a lot of times people from Daito Ryu see Hapkido as kind of the hybridization of Korean striking arts with the lock and restraint arts of the Japanese. How do you see that particular perspective, if not the bigger explanation of how did your Hapkido change from the Japanese arts, if you have enough of an understanding of the direct Daito Ryu link?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No problem. Hapkido, when I've trained with Daito Ryu people, it looks like this style of Hapkido is more similar than other styles. That's the thing that's been mentioned to me, is we move a little bit more like Daito Ryu practitioners rather than what you normally see as Hapkido practitioners. Hapkido, for example, we'll take kicking, for example. In our style of Hapkido, we have maybe 10 kicks, and the majority of them are all to the legs. One of the reasons why I'm going to kick somebody in the head is because they're already bent over in front of me. There's not a lot of high kicking. There's not a lot of flashy stuff. It's pretty short, sweet, hard to beat, and it's kind of like the way our locks are as well. The kicking really came from Chiang School students such as Jihan Jae, and I believe Kim Woo Hwang. I believe those two were like the guys who really started putting the kicking into Hapkido. So like drop bomb spin kicks and, the more flashier kicks. So one of the reasons why you see it so prevalent in Hapkido today is because Jihan Jie was a fantastic promoter of Hapkido. I mean, I think that if it wasn't for him, most of the world wouldn't see Hapkido. He was really a go-getter. He went out and really promoted it like a champ. So he's one of those guys that I definitely need to give credit for as far as promoting Hapkido. But the kicking is one thing. The other thing that I see that makes it different is we focus a lot on off-balancing, a lot on what the Japanese call kuzushi. Sometimes you kind of just, how do I put this? When doing techniques, you see a lot of knocked up, a lot of people like kind of falling and doing their own falling. A lot of times in the Jungki style of Hapkido, we're off balancing them and driving them so where they don't have the ability to jump it, to fall ahead of it. So you're kind of just grinding them into the ground. Or if you're doing a throw, you're literally picking their center up and tossing it. It's not about, all right, I'm going to do this technique and you're going to do this in order to save yourself. No. How we're doing it is pretty much the majority of times is I'm going to do a technique to you and you have a choice on what to do. You're just going to end up doing it, not because you're thinking about it, because that's where I'm putting it. And it may sound esoteric, but it's really not. It's just natural law, anatomy and physiology. Being able to manipulate somebody is not magic. It's just a science. And when you do it over and over and over again to many, many people, you start to see you can off-balance somebody. You can put them in a position to where they can't change their position to get out of it, or they can't do other things to get out of it. You're just pretty much putting them down because of that off-balance, because of that position. So I see that as being a little bit different as well. And from what I've heard from my friends who do Daito Ryu, that's more similar to what they do, is where they're driving in. They're drilling people into the ground. It's not about, all right, you do this, I do this, we're going to have this planned dance just to keep you safe. If you off-balance them well enough, you can do the technique really hard without having to damage them. And sorry to backtrack a little bit. One of the things I do like about this style of Hapkido is the various levels of force. Because of that point, if I off-balance a person well enough, I can do the technique on somebody who is very strong, who is resistant, and if I do the off-balance well enough, I can put him down without having to hurt him. Having the option is awesome, and I really dig that. So, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. There's vast differences within the schools, and I'm always interested in those. But there's even more interesting history with the Daito Ryu stuff, which is for another podcast, because you have other schools of the same geographic location that influence Daito Ryu, and sometimes you can see those more prominent in the other schools that kind of come from it. And at some point, you're out in the East Coast, I understand. At some point, I'd like to get out to the East Coast and compare notes. But specifically with other Hapkido schools, your relationship with them, when you get together with a person of another lineage, where do you normally pick up? Where do you normally start to kind of exchange and see the differences?
Well, I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I'm a martial arts whore. I love to train, and I don't care who you are, what style you train in. I just love getting together. As far as, if you've been in the martial arts long enough, you know you have some martial arts snobs where they think their stuff is the best stuff on the earth and they can't learn anything from you. You know, I don't necessarily get along well with those types. Where do we start when I go to a Hapkido, another Hapkido school as far as Lineage is concerned? You know, anyway, right? Just whenever I'm working with somebody, I always notice how hard they grab. So if they're grabbing very light, I know to go light. If they grab really hard, I know I need to off-balance them a lot more. You know, it's not a competition when I get together with another practitioner. It's about exchanging ideas, about having a good time, comparing and contrasting. Somebody had said one time, and I really, really liked it. They said, too many people look for the differences in martial arts and don't look for the similarities. And I was like, damn, that's beautiful, because it's so true. So when I go to another practitioner, you know, we take it slow and see where they want to go with it. It's like a painting. Just kind of start here and move on from there and see how it goes.
Chris, I had a question for you. And this is something you actually said to me when I met you years and years ago, and you probably have no recollection of this whatsoever. But I remember, I mean, it was literally a brief, 30-second conversation, and but I find it interesting because that 30-second conversation, and this happens to me a lot in life. You know, I find that I learn a lot on the mat, and I learn so much more just talking to people, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, because I've pulled away so much useful information just from having conversations with instructors that I would honestly say it's probably about equal to what I've learned on the mat. But you said to me, you know, I'd asked you, I said, well, what do you like about your Hapkido? Because I had done some Hapkido at the time, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you basically said to me, you know, that whole thing of, oh, I got to hit him first to make the joint lock work. I got to, do the distraction shots or soften him up to make it work. And you said to me, I don't have to do that. You know, I learned the way to do that, you know, to do the locks and apply the techniques without having to do that. And that was helpful to me because that you obviously didn't show me at that moment, but you put that seed in my mind and made me go out and look for that solution. And thankfully, I think I've kind of found it, you know, but you were definitely instrumental in that conversation was instrumental in helping me to say, oh, I don't have to do it like that. Let me go figure out what this guy's talking about. So tell me about that in your system. And I've seen video, you know, a lot of video on your system, and I don't see a lot of that. Like, you know, you see a lot of Hapkido and you see the guys, you know, oh, the guy grabs you and you have to hit him, you know, 6 times to soften him up. And you'll even hear instructors say things like, well, these joint locks, you know, they won't work unless you soften the guy up first. What are your thoughts on that? What about your particular school helped you to be able to understand how to apply your technique without having to do that?
Well, I was in Hapkido prior to getting into the Jungki Kwan, and I had trained for a long time before that, and I had ended up getting into a bar fight. I was a musician, and one night some guy didn't like me. And so all night long, you know, screaming at me while I'm on stage, I'm like, kick your ass, F you, you know, I'm going to get you, blah, blah, blah. So whatever. So we played a gig afterwards. It ends up going down. I couldn't talk my way out of it, couldn't avoid the situation, and it ended up getting rough. So what happened is I was a Hapkido practitioner, so I ended up trying to do some locks and stuff like that. And I hit this dude like good, and no reaction. I hit him multiple times, no real reaction. He was on something, probably a bunch of things. So after that situation happened, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm trying to do these techniques on this dude, and I'm softening him up, trying to fake him out, and it's not working. What the hell's wrong? I must suck. The case is, it's not true. I didn't suck. It's just I wasn't really aware of all the potentials and all the variables that are necessary to pull some of those things off. So I thought to myself, does Hapkido stink? Do I stink or whatever? So me being the martial arts whore I am, I train with everybody. So one of the people I trained with was Todd Miller of the Jungki Kwan, and Grandmaster Link's Jungki Kwan. And just doing seminars and stuff like that, taking seminars that they put on, it answered the questions that I'd never asked anybody. I asked myself, but I didn't ask anybody else. Like, do I have to get them? Do I have to try to fake them out? You know, because I'm not a lucky man. That's why I don't go to Vegas. I don't win at luck. I win at being prepared. So I'm seeing that you don't have to hit them. You don't have to, you know, try to fake them out in order to pull these off. Can you? Absolutely. But you don't have to. And this is where the levels of force comes in. You know, I may not want to hit this person. It might be a family member that I just need for them to calm down, to put them in a condition where, you know, they can't hurt me or can't hurt somebody else. You know, I need to subdue them. But I don't want to knock their teeth out. I don't want to kill them, you know. So that was very gratifying to me to see and hear my questions being answered without me asking them. So that's how I got into the Jungki Kwan.
And Hanjiro, let me ask you, do you find it similar in Daito Ryu that you do not have to do that kind of salt and pepper action before applying your techniques?
There's some lines of Daito Ryu that teach that, actually, as part of the Shoden Mokuroku, which is like the beginning levels, that you try to strike an individual, and in striking that individual, you get yourself of their attack. And then that people think that that's to soften the guy up, but actually, as you're striking the guy, your body changes position so that you're out of the way of his attack, but it comes off looking like you're softening the guy up. So, yeah, that happens, but there's other lines of Daito Ryu which are influenced heavily by another art called Asayama Ichita Ryu, which is, it looks like a hard striking art, and that's how it was taught in the beginning, but it changed over time to be something that looks like a strike that lands directly into a lock. And that's the other part of Daito Ryu, some of the older lines that happen. But when done correctly, that's the whole premise behind Aikido, is that you're able to land a person with soft power into unbalancing or a lock or an uncompromising position that makes it unnecessary to salt and pepper the guy or soften him up. So I've seen it both ways. I still regularly have matches with people, and last one was a Daito Ryu guy a couple of days ago. Similar thing, tried to soften me up, and he didn't understand. So sometimes it works, and like Chris said, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it's a part of the line, and sometimes it isn't. It's just, Daito Ryu, again, is such a big, multi-layered and multi-dimensional kind of art now. There's no one thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Chris, let me ask you, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is some of the underlying principles of Hapkido. And I think one of the most well-known principles, but maybe often misunderstood, is the principle of water. How is that expressed in your school, and what's your understanding of it?
You know, you've got Bruce Lee's quote, you know, the teapot be like water. You know, it's adaptable, but it's also forceful. It's also determined. It's very, if you continue, it can drive through anything. You know, the single drop on a stone, just one drop doesn't do anything. But continuously, time after time after time, it wears through that rock. So these are things how we look at in our technique. You know, sometimes we want to absorb that attack. Sometimes we want to just drive it home, and we want to be what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out, gentlemen.
Persistent?
Persistent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Exactly. Sometimes we need to be persistent on what we need to do, whether that is for a technique or whether that's for life. You learn that through the water principle. Sometimes you need to, you know, be soft. Sometimes you need to be strong. And that's one of the things we get from the water principle.
And Hanjiro, is that same type of concept expressed in Daito Ryu at all?
It is as a founding principle, yeah, but within different techniques, within sunokata, like water techniques, you lack hard, direct, forceful pressure. So that's where being, like we said, possibly soft, but drowning your opponent per se, where you're just persistent. You're completely enveloping them and wrapping them up, and then slowly constricting and closing everything off. It's different than all of those other things. But yeah, definitely.
Okay. Now, but the other kind of thing, you can think of water as being hard as well. You know, if you jump off a bridge and you hit that water's pretty hard. So it depends whether you want to think of it as soft or hard. That's where we're thinking about that. Also, water's dynamic, constantly changing. You see it here, you see it there. It's never the same.
Very interesting. Gentlemen, I do need to apologize. I'm a butcher by trade, and I have a bunch of animals waiting to be cut up, so I got to get back into the cooler. But
Chris, pleasure talking with you.
Very, very good talking with you. Hopefully, I'll talk some other time.
Thank you, Hanjiro, for being with us.
Come down to Chicago, we can get together.
Anytime.
Great.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you. Have a good morning.
Thank you, Hanjiro.
Take care. You too.
Yeah.
So, Chris, let me move on to my next question. I've seen Hapkido that is extremely effective, extremely dynamic, very well trained to a very high level, and I see a lot more Hapkido that's not. What are your thoughts on the kind of the state of Hapkido in the United States right now? Are people training it right? Are people, and I'm not trying to disparage any group or another, but just the general state of things. Because I've seen some Hapkido that looks like Olympic Taekwondo with a few wrist locks, and that's kind of what's put out there as Hapkido. What are your thoughts? Does Hapkido do people in the Hapkido community need to concentrate more on a certain area of training? Do they need to improve their Hapkido?
I think people need to do as much research as possible, because sometimes it comes down to you don't know what you don't know. People are putting a lot of heart and a lot of effort into training in a specific style of Hapkido, but they don't know what else is out there. I'm not saying that any style is bad, but there sometimes are limitations put on because of the limited amount of training. If we look at, Hapkido from Che Young-sul, you'll see that some people spend a little time with them, other people spend a lot of time with them. And you can see, when people spend more time with Che Young-sul, that their technique was really something special. For example, going back to a topic we talked about before, as far as not having to strike, Chin-Il Chang, Grandmaster Chin-Il Chang, is one of the 4 ninth dans that Che Young-sul promoted. And I had done a seminar with him before I was in the Jungki Kwan. And he was here, and he was in Massachusetts. And he brought up a 5th dan from the hosting organization. And he says, okay, so you're going to do the technique, and you're just going to try to do the technique. And he grabbed him hard. So he just didn't, grab him lightly like a lot of people expect. No, he latched on. And you could see the confusion in this guy's face of, do I hit him? What do I do? Right? Because they're used to softening people up. So, and he couldn't move him. He couldn't even budge him. It was like, oh my goodness. And you could see this guy just getting so frustrated. And he's like, okay. So then Chin-Il Chang then explained how to do this. And that was my first real glimpse into Che Young-sul's Hapkido and off-balancing and manipulation. It was about proper footwork. It was about proper trajectory of where you're moving. It was about moving your center as a whole, your body as a whole, moving from the center. And it was something that I could go, oh, which was more of a light bulb rather than a he's talking over everybody's head like this some mythological, esoteric thing that, you know, you won't understand until you've been there on the top of the mountain and stuff. No, he explained it and showed it to where it was like, that makes sense. Okay, so it's something that needs to be practiced. It's not something that comes, you know, at the drop of a hat, but it's one of those things where you can take somebody who's latched on hard, you know, and be able to manipulate them and their body into a position to where you can take them down, do damage, whatever you need to do. So that was my first eye-opening thing. And I don't see a lot of that in schools here in America. I do see it in a few. So it's not like it's not anywhere. It's just what I teach. No, it's not that at all. It's just that I don't see it as much as I would like to. That's probably a big thing, you know. And of course, you know, the kicking is a different aspect. What happens a lot is that Taekwondo instructors will learn some Hoshinsul, they'll learn some self-defense, they'll call it Hapkido, and then they'll teach it to their students, calling it Hapkido instead of Hoshinsul, which is self-defense. And some teachers will actually give them ranks in Hapkido because they know how to do some self-defense moves. So therefore, people don't know that they're not really learning Hapkido, they're learning self-defense. But yet, because of our society of having to, pull a, be able to get a reward from it, be able to, have a successful school, we got to make more money. So instructors sometimes will do that. And that's an unfortunate thing that I see happening in the States as well.
Can you clarify for me, Chris, Hoshinsul, is it a different system, or is it just a category of techniques that you learn?
Hoshinsul is a general phrase for self-defense techniques. So it's not a specific style, it's just a category title.
Gotcha. Now, Chris, let me ask you, because I know you do a lot of weapons training as well, and I know you've done, you do practice Filipino martial arts, but what about weapons in your school? I know that a lot of Hapkido schools will incorporate, some schools will incorporate one or two weapons, others will incorporate, massive amounts of weaponry. From your particular school, what kind of weapons are taught?
From the Jungki Kwan perspective, or from my school specifically?
Let's go with both.
All right, so the Jungki Kwan, not a lot of weaponry. Knife. But one of the big things is sword. Grandmaster Lim developed a style called Cheongsuk Gohapdo. Gohapdo is pretty much Iaido is a Korean translation of the word Iaido. So it's very similar in that aspect. Grandmaster Lim studied in Korean blade arts, but also was a very prominent student of Komei Sekaguchi Sensei, who is a Muso Jikida Nation practitioner in Japan. Grandmaster Lim studied a lot under him, and also a lot of sensei as well. But Grandmaster Lim is about bringing people together. That's one of the cool things about Grandmaster Lim, is that he's not one of those people that's an elitist. Unfortunately, a lot of people may get that way, but Grandmaster Lim is not. He, rather than trying to separate people, he tries to bring people together. And you can see it as far as his sword work is concerned. He's trying to, bridge that gap, that rift between the Japanese and the Korean people. And one of the ways he does that is through sword. So, when I first went to Korea, I just wanted to train in Hapkido. I wasn't interested in anything else. I just wanted to go train in sword. And Grandmaster Lim asked me, he said, so in the morning, we'll do Hapkido, and then in the afternoon, we'll do Hapdo. And I was like, sir, I'd rather just do Hapkido. He goes, really? He says, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. He goes, and then he started talking about it. He goes, oh, you want to be Hapkido man? He goes, well, those people who do Gohapdo, their Hapkido gets better, and those people who do Hapkido, their Gohapdo gets better. And when I first heard it, I was like, I'm not buying it. But here I'm in Korea, and I could be training in a style that was developed by this gentleman right here. Why don't I take that opportunity? So I did, and I was pleasantly surprised. And now, as I continued doing the Jungki Hapkido over the years, I've realized that he was right. Because a lot of the footwork is very similar. The hand position is similar. The movements are similar, and therefore are similar to Hapkido. So therefore, it's true that those people do Hapkido, their Hapkido gets better, and those who do Hapkido, their Hapkido gets better. Because Hapkido, you need another person. You need their energy. You need their resistance. You need their body weight. You need, a whole bunch of things to really get good and to practice, because we don't have forms in traditional Hapkido. In Jungki Hapkido, we don't have forms per se. So how do we practice by ourselves? Through the Hapkido. And I was like, wow. It took me a little while to see that, but I was very happy to see that. So sword work is very big in the Jungki Kwan organization. There are other small things that Grandmaster Lim can teach, but it's not prevalent unless you ask for it.
And what about at your home school, where you're the chief instructor? What weapons are you teaching to your students?
I do a lot of different weapons. I do the Hapkido. I do single stick, double stick, single knife, double knife, stick and knife. Sword, more of a mid-length sword, more of a Filipino type sword, flexible weapons, so that kind of thing. So I do introduce a bit more. So, but that's a smaller group, because I'm primarily right now traveling a lot, doing seminars. So I'm traveling around the United States doing seminars for people, whether it's in martial arts, traditional martial arts, modern combatives, because I'm one of Hakai's certified knife instructors, or whether it's in, traditional medicine, traditional Chinese medicine or Eastern medicine, I really should say, because I'm trained in various styles of acupuncture. I taught at the University of Bridgeport and Tri-State College of Acupuncture, so I go and travel doing seminars in Eastern medicine as well. Sometimes we put them together, and I do, a combo class. It really depends on the host what they want. So, do they want the hurting? Do they want the healing? In school we joked about, in acupuncture school we joked about, how are we going to get patients, those who are not in the medical field? And everybody in class knew I was a martial artist, and they were like, "Wow, Chris is just going to create his own clients. He's going to create his own patients." So hence I came up with the phrase, Chris Lacava, beat him and treat him. And that's kind of like my seminars. So it's really, I've been fortunate with what I've been able to learn and being able to share that with other people. So.
Very cool. Now, Chris, let me ask you, this is something I ask, all the guests when they come on. The warrior tribe, the Raven tribe, is really dedicated to developing the concept of warriorship past the punching and kicking, looking at warriorship as a lifestyle. And I wanted to ask you, in Hapkido, is there a method in your system of helping to foster that development? Are the lessons, very clear to the students? Are they more, just on a lower level where they kind of have to tease it out for themselves? Or does Hapkido have a code or a method that it uses to instill some of this warriorship into the students?
Well, Grandmaster Lim always preaches about training. And I feel that warriorship training is primarily done through training. It's through the discipline of doing what you don't want to do, even though you're tired, even though you're hurt, to continue to do what you need to do because it needs to be done, right? It's that persistence. And time again, Grandmaster Lim always talks about training, just train, just do it. And that persistence is what's necessary to be a warrior. We see it from our basic, principles with the water technique, being persistent, being able to eventually, break through the stone. We see it with Grandmaster Lim talking about, discipline, having to just do what you got to do, even though you don't want to. Because we all get tired. We all feel pain. We all feel that, not now, I'll do it later. No, now. Do it now. Because when you do stuff like that, everything else seems easier. So I think that's one of the ways that Grandmaster Lim and I help promote warriorship within our own students.
Great. Well, Chris, I want to thank you for coming on the show and talking with us about Hapkido and about your journey in the art and doing a little bit of compare and contrast with Hanjido. The audience at home, if they're interested in reaching out to you, you teach traditional martial arts, you teach medicine, you teach defensive tactics at your home school and across the U.S. So if people want to reach out to you, get you out for a seminar, for a workshop, how can they reach out to you?
I'm on Facebook. You can look up Christopher Lacava. I have a teacher page there, or you can give me a call on my phone at 203-767-6567.
Great. Well, Chris, thank you again very much for being part of the show today. We really like having you on, and hopefully we can get you on in the future and talk about some more interesting topics.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me. It's been an honor.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
I will talk to you soon.